Welcome back to On the Same Page. We are on Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis, 13b of Maseches Brachos, and we're starting 8 lines from the bottom of the page. But the Gemara, we have to go back to the Mishnah really to understand what's going on in the Gemara. And the Mishnah brought 2 opinions regarding when one may interrupt and for what one may interrupt during the Brachos of Kriyas Shema and during Kriyas Shema itself. So the Mishnah had said that biprakim, which meant being a prakim, between the paragraphs of, between the brachos basically, and between the paragraphs of Shema. So the first opinion was shoel mipnei hakavod umeshiv. You can ask someone how they're doing. You can greet someone if it's someone who you should be honoring, and you can respond to them. Now it doesn't say what situation you can respond to them, which is going to be the Gemara's question. You can respond to them anytime, anybody, only for honor. So the first opinion just says you can greet them for honor and respond. And be'emta, in the middle of a bracha, or in the middle of one of the paragraphs of Shema, so then it's more stringent. So then, shalom ibnei ayira, you can only inquire out of fear if you feel like you're in danger somehow. If you don't greet the person, it's a king or something, a general, whatever, so a soldier. So then you can greet the person. Umeshiv, you can respond. And again, it doesn't say respond to anyone, respond only out of fear. Divrei Rabbi Meir, that was the opinion of Rabbi Meir. And Rabbi Yehuda, where the Mishnah said, Rabbi Yehuda said, be'emtza shalom ibnei ayira. So Rabbi Yehuda agreed that if you're in the middle of a bracha, you can only inquire out of fear. And in terms of responding, he clarified. He did say when you can respond. You can respond libnei hakavod, to honor somebody, but not just anybody, but certainly out of fear, but also to honor somebody. You can respond to their greeting. And beprakim, between the paragraphs, he also agreed that it's more lenient, and you can greet somebody to honor them. And again, he explains when you can respond. Umeshiv shalom l'chol adam. You can respond to anybody. So basically what it comes out is everybody agrees that between the paragraphs you could greet somebody to honor them, and certainly if it's out of fear. In the middle of a paragraph, you can greet somebody out of fear, but that's it. You can only initiate if you're in fear. And in terms of responding, the first opinion didn't really say what he meant. He just said umeshiv. He didn't say for what situation. That was Rabbi Meir. And Rabbi Yehuda said that if you're in between, if you're in the middle of a paragraph, you can only answer either out of fear or to honor somebody, but not just anybody. And if you're in between, you can answer the greeting of anybody. And we're going to use Rabbi Yehuda to figure out what Rabbi Meir was saying, because Rabbi Meir didn't say. So says the Gemara, now back on Yud Gimel Amud Beis, really actually 6 lines from the bottom, it says, Meshiv machmas mai. When Rabbi Meir says you can respond, for what? Who can you respond to? So begin with the first case. The first case was that he spoke about was being a prakim, between the paragraphs, where you can greet somebody to honor them, and it's like you can respond. So if he's saying mipnei hakavod, that you can greet somebody, you can respond to somebody to honor them, well, that's kind of obvious. Hashta mishal sha'il. If it already said you could initiate, you could greet somebody to honor them, do you have to tell me that you could respond? Of course you could respond. A lack of responding to somebody's greeting is much more insulting. So certainly, there's no need to say, if all he meant was you can answer somebody's greeting to honor them, you don't need to say that, because if you could greet somebody, if you could initiate to honor them, then surely you could respond. Ela shalom ibnei hakavod. It must be he meant you can greet somebody to honor them in between the chapters, and you can respond to anybody's greeting. Now the problem is that that's what Rabbi Yehuda said, so that can't really be what Rabbi Meir is saying. But the Gemara, before it asks the question, it also considers the second part. It says, Ema Seifa. Well, let's look at the Seifa. Let's look at the next thing he says. he says, Uve emtza, Rabbi Meir says that if you're in the middle of a paragraph, or in the middle of a bracha, Shal b'nei ayira, you can only, then it's more stringent if you're in the middle, you can only initiate, you can only greet out of fear. Umeishiv, and you can respond. Meishiv machmas mai, for who? Who can you respond to? Doesn't say. If it's saying you could respond out of fear, so that's obvious. Hashta mishal sha'il. If you can greet out of fear, ahaduri mibai, you need to tell me that you can respond out of fear? Of course you could. So so you're going to tell me that what he meant was that you can respond to honor somebody. Well, Hainu Rabbi Yehuda. That's the same as Rabbi Yehuda. Ditznai, because we learned in the Mishnah goes on and says Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda says, Be'emtza shal b'nei ayira meishav b'nei kavod. That in the middle of a paragraph, you can only ask out of fear, you can only greet somebody out of fear. And you can only respond to honor somebody. Uveprakim shal b'nei kavod no meishav shal mochel adam. And in between paragraphs, you can greet somebody. It's more lenient. You could greet somebody if you need to honor them, and it's more lenient. You can respond to anybody. But that's what we're suggesting Rabbi Meir was saying too. Well, they can't be they're saying the same thing. They're clearly arguing. So says the Gemara, Chasri mechsera v'hachi ktani. The Mishnah is missing some words. This is what it means to say, Beprakim shal b'nei ayira. Beprakim shal b'nei akavod ve'ein tzarech lomar shu meishiv. So you have to add in the words ve'ein tzarech lomar. You don't need to say, which means as long as the Mishnah acknowledges that it's obvious, then it's okay to say the obvious. So you have to read the Mishnah that it's saying that if you're in between, Rabbi Meir, the first opinion is saying, if you're in between paragraphs, so we're more lenient, Shalal mimnei akavod, you can greet somebody to give them honor, and of course you can also respond to their greeting. But if it's just kol adam, if it's anybody, so then, according to Rabbi Meir, you can't respond to just a regular person, only if it's someone who you need to honor. So Rabbi Meir is more stringent than Rabbi Yehuda. Uve emtza, and if you're in the middle of a paragraph, then we're more stringent. Shalom b'nei you can only greet somebody out of fear, but not to give them honor. Ve'ein tzarech lomar shu meishav, and of course you can also respond out of fear. Divrei Rabbi Meir, that's the opinion of Rabbi Meir, and Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda says be'emtza shalom b'nei ayira. No, if you're in the middle, I agree that you can only greet somebody out of fear, but I say that I'm more lenient when it comes to responding to somebody. Not only can you respond to somebody out of fear, like Rabbi Meir, like you said, but you can even respond to somebody to give them honor. Uveprakim, and if you're between the paragraphs, Shalom b'nei akavod, top of the next page, so says Rabbi Yehuda, I agree that you can only greet somebody to give them honor or out of fear, but not just anybody. But if you're returning a greeting, Rabbi Yehuda is more lenient. He says you can return anybody's greeting. Tanya nami hachi. Now we learned in a brayso actually explicitly that this is what Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda were saying, because it says Hakareh Shema upaga bo rabo o gadol himenu. If somebody was reading Shema and the Rebbe or somebody greater than them encountered them, somebody who you have to give honor to. So, beprakim shal b'nei akavod. If you're in between paragraphs, you can greet them out of honor, to give them honor. Ve'ein tzarech lomar shehu meishiv. And of course, you can respond. This is going to be the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Uve emtza. And if you're in the middle of a paragraph, then shal b'nei ayira. You can only greet them if you're in fear. And of course you can respond. Divrei Rabbi Meir, that's all the opinion of Rabbi Meir. That is the more stringent opinion, that in the middle, in between chapters, you can only respond to honor somebody or out of fear, but not just anybody. And in the middle of a chapter, you can only respond out of fear, but not for honor. But Rabbi Yehuda says, Be'emtza shal b'nei ayira, that if you're in the middle of a paragraph, you are allowed to greet somebody out of fear, like Rabbi Meir said, Umeishav b'nei akavod, but he's more lenient. He says you can respond to a greeting just to give honor. Uveprakim, if you're in between paragraphs, then shal b'nei akavod, you can greet somebody to give them honor. Umeishav shal mochel adam, and he's very lenient that you can respond to anybody's greeting, even if it's somebody who you have no requirement or need to honor. Okay. Ba mine Achi Tana debe Rabbi Chia. Achi, who learned in the Beis Medrash Rabbi Chia, asked Rabbi Chia, Behalal v'Megillah ma'u sheyafsik. What about if you're saying Hallel or reading the Megillah? Are you allowed to interrupt to, I guess, maybe out of honor? I think we would think out of fear you could. Maybe it's asking even to give somebody honor, could you interrupt? So, mi amrinan kavachomer. Do we say that it's a kavachomer? Kriya Shema D'Oraisa Posik. If in the middle of Shema, which is a mitzvah D'Oraisa, it's a Torah mitzvah, you're allowed to interrupt. So Hallel D'Rabbanan Mibai. Is there any question in the middle of Hallel you should be able to interrupt? Meaning, I suppose actually we would maybe want to apply the same halachos according to each opinion. So whatever you held, you can interrupt for in the middle of a paragraph. So we're asking, what about in the middle of a paragraph of Hallel? Can you interrupt for the same things? And whatever you held, you can interrupt for in between the paragraphs. What about in Hallel, between paragraphs, can you interrupt for the same thing? Do we say, of course, Kriya Shema is D'Oraisa, it's Torah mitzvah. Hallel is only a rabbinic enactment. The words come from Tehillim, but the concept of saying Hallel, holidays, is only D'Rabbanan. O Dilma, or maybe you'll say Pirsume Nisa Adif, that publicizing a miracle is greater, and since when you say, certainly when you read the Megillah, as well when you say Hallel, you are publicizing a miracle. What does that mean? So it might depend which Hallel. I think on Chanukah when we say Hallel, we're publicizing a miracle. Maybe Pesach. Maybe just the fact that in Hallel we talk about Yetzias Mitzrayim. Maybe because there's a value, there's an aspect of Pirsumei Nisa, publicizing a miracle, so it's more significant, even though it's only D'Rabbanan, and we're more stringent about interrupting. This was the question that Achi asked Rabbi Chia, and Amar Lei, and Rabbi Chia responded, Posek ve'im b'kach klam. You can interrupt, and there's no problem. So he held that it's certainly more lenient than the Shema. Amar Rava, or Rabba, different versions. Rabba said, Yomim sha'yachid gomer b'nyas ha'halel. So you say it depends. If it's a day that you say full Hallel, so then being parak leparak posek, b'emtza parak eno posek. If you're between paragraphs, then you can interrupt. But if you are in the middle of a paragraph, then you may not interrupt. That's on a day that you say full Hallel. Rashi says it's an obligation on those days to say it. We're more stringent about interrupting. But but days that we don't say full Hallel, where Hallel is just a minhag, like Rosh Chodesh and Pesach after the first 2 days. So then, anytime we have a half Hallel, so it's only a minhag, so then you'd be allowed to interrupt even in the middle of a paragraph. Again, we don't mean for nothing, you can't interrupt for nothing, but for a need like this to greet, if it's needed, then you may. Ask the Gemara, Eini, is it true? Rab bar Shava ikol gabe Ravina. Rab, the son of Shava, once went to Ravina, and it was a day that you don't say full Hallel, and Ravina did not interrupt to greet Rav bar Shava. So it seems that even though it's a day of half Hallel, you still don't greet somebody out of honor. So the Gemara answers, Shani Rav bar Shava lo chashav alei Ravina. That's different. He didn't think that he needs to honor him. Ravina did not consider Rav bar Shava somebody that you needed to honor, and that's why he didn't interrupt. But really, if it's somebody who you need to honor, then you'd be allowed to interrupt even the emtza parak, even in the middle of a paragraph of Hallel, which I believe means that what we're actually saying is that Hallel is more lenient, which is what the Gemara originally said. It said, Posek ve'en b'kachlim, there's no problem to interrupt. And Rava said that it's really more so on days that we say half Hallel, that it's okay to interrupt, at least in the middle of a paragraph. Rava said, if it's a day we say full Hallel, if we're in between paragraphs, fine. Then I agree you can interrupt. It sounds like whether to greet, certainly to greet somebody out of fear, maybe even to, and even to greet somebody out of honor. But if you're in the middle of a paragraph of Hallel, so then if it's a day you say full Hallel and it's an obligation, you shouldn't interrupt in the middle of a paragraph. Again, I would think it's to give somebody honor, but out of fear you would be able to, but to give somebody honor you shouldn't interrupt. But if it's a day that you say half Hallel, then you're allowed to interrupt even in the middle of a paragraph. To which the Gemara asked from this story, but Ravina didn't interrupt for Rav Bar Shava in the middle of a paragraph, and it was only a day of half Hallel, and the Gemara said that's because he didn't feel the need to honor him. Okay. Continues the Gemara, so this is seemingly an unrelated question, but it has a similar construct, I guess. Like it's somebody who learned in a Beis Medrash asking that Rebbe. So before it was Achi who learned by Rabbi Chia, asked Rabbi Chia. Now we have Ashiyan who learned by Rabbi Ami asking Rabbi Ami. Hasharoi b'tainis, ma'u sheyitom. Somebody who is involved in a fast, are they allowed to taste food? Are you allowed to taste food without swallowing it if you are fasting? So, achila ushtia kabel. Eating and drinking, he accepted by himself. V'haleka. That's what, when a person accepts a fast upon themselves, and as Tosfos points out, it seems that this is specifically talking about a fast that a person accepts on themselves, not a public fast. Although, I think some will apply it to a public fast. So he says what he accepted by himself was to eat or drink, and that's not what he's doing. He's just tasting. Dilma hana kabbalale, or maybe no, he really accepted not to get hana, not to get pleasure. V'hayika, and when you taste something, you still get the pleasure of tasting it. So, which one is it? If you're fasting, if you accept upon yourself a fast, are you allowed to taste something? You're not eating or drinking, but you are getting pleasure. So it depends what a person accepted upon themselves. What do we say a person is accepting upon themselves when they accept a fast? So Amarle, so Rabbi Ami responded, Toem ve'im bekach kulam. You can taste and it's fine. That's not considered eating or drinking. Tosfos brings from Rabbi Chanana, we're talking about where you spit it out. Tanya nami hachi, we have a brayso that expresses this. Matemes eina tu'una bracha. If you're tasting something, you don't need to make a bracha, because it's not eating or drinking. Vashari b'tainis, and if you're involved in a fast, toem, you can taste food, ve'im bekach kum, and it's not a problem. Ad kama, how much are you allowed to taste? Rabbi Yami, Rabbi Yasi, Tami ad shir reviasa. Rabbi Yami, Rabbi Yasi would taste up to a revius. Different opinions what that is. 3.3 milliliters or 5 milliliters, different opinions, I think. But up to a revius, and if you're eating, I think we say up to a kazayas, but not more. If it's more than that, then it's too substantial to say it's just tasting. Again, Rabbi Chananel says we're talking about where you spit it back out. Again, I think about that. There's also different opinions. If maybe even if you're going to swallow it, or if you're just doing it to taste it, not to enjoy it, then maybe it doesn't need a bracha. Maybe you could do it on a fast. But in general, there's good reason to be stringent about this. Okay. Amar Rav said, Kula no saying shalom lachaveir kodem sheyispalel. Anybody who greets their friend, shalom, hello, before they daven, kilu aso bama. It's like they made their friend into a bama. A bama is an altar that one erects in their, a backyard mizbeach, a backyard altar. Shenamar, why is it like that? Because the pasuk says, "Chidru lachem min ha'adam asher neshama be'apo ki vameh nechshavhu." So this is a pasuk in Yeshaya. It says, stay away from man, because what is he worth? Man who has a neshama in him, because what is he worth? And we say, Al tikri bameh ela bama. Don't read it as bameh, what is he worth? Ela bama. He's considered a bama. He's considered an altar that's outside. What is the connection between greeting somebody before davening? So it seems that if you are greeting somebody before davening, you're giving kind of that person attention before you're giving God attention. And that's like building an altar somewhere else. It seems, I think from the simple analogy here, that it's an altar not for God, but for Avodah Zarah, because you are kind of looking elsewhere before you look to God. Ushmuel Amar, Shmuel says, Bima chashavto lezeh v'lo le'eloka. He says you don't have to read it as bama. Forget about saying it's like you brought a bama, but the pasuk could still be expressing the same thing. And it's saying, Bameh nechshavu. What is he worth? What consideration have you given this person by greeting him before you go and greet God? Masav Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes asks a contradiction on this opinion of Rav and Shmuel. Both of them agree that you're not allowed to greet somebody before davening. So he said, what do you mean? It says in the Mishnah, B'prakim, Shoam ibnei hakavod, umeshiv. It says in the Mishnah that if you're in between paragraphs, you can greet somebody, and you can respond, and you haven't yet said Shema Esrei if you're in between paragraphs of Shema, so you haven't really davened yet. So how can you greet somebody? So Tirgum Rabbi Abba b'mashkim lepischo. Rabbi Abba said, no. When Rav and Shmuel say you can't greet somebody before davening, it meant you can't go over to their house to greet them, or even out of your way in shul to go and greet them. So before davening, a person shouldn't go out of their way to go and greet somebody. When Rav and Shmuel said that you can interrupt to greet somebody, it means the person came over to you. They didn't necessarily greet you first, but they passed you. They came to you. Okay, continues the Gemara. Amar of Idi, skipping the parentheses. Amar of Idi bar Aver, Amar of Yitzchak bar Ashiyan. Rav Idi bar Aver said in the name of Yitzchak bar Ashiyan, Asr lo l'adam lasos chafatzav kodem sheyispalo. A person, not only are you not allowed to greet somebody, but you can't attend to your needs before you daven. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Tzedek lefanav yehalech, v'yasem l'derech pe'amav. Tzedek should go before him, and he should put his feet on the ground. What does that have to do with not taking care of your needs before davening? So, tzedek, righteousness, should go before him means you should daven first. That you should... Tzedek is a reference to tefillah, the way he's darshing it, the way he's learning out, to davening. It makes you righteous before God. So righteousness should go before him. And then then you should put your feet towards the way to take care of your needs. But first daven. So you're not allowed to take care of your needs before you daven. If one does this, one davens and then they leave, then they go and travel to take care of their needs or travel, Hashem takes care of his needs. Shenemar, as it says, same pasuk, just different drasha. Tzedek lefanav yehalech, v'yasem l'derech pe'amav. Again, tefillah will go before him, and then he'll put his feet to the way, and he'll be successful. So, the same drasha, basically, One is understanding it to be telling you what to do, and one is saying that if you do it, you'll be successful. The first drasha is that don't take care of your needs before, rather tzedek, you should put tzedek, tefillah, we're saying that means. That which makes yourself righteous before God, that should go before you first. And then, then put your feet to the way to take care of your needs. The other way to darshing it, the second way is, if you put tefillah first, then you'll put your feet to the way successfully. Okay. One more thought here. Amar Rabbi Yonah, Amar Rabbi Zera. Kol halan shivas yamim below chalom nikra ra. Anybody who sleeps for 7 days and doesn't have a single dream, they're called bad. It's bad news. Why? Shenamar, because the pasuk says, it's a pasuk in Mishlei. It says, first says Yiras Hashem l'chaim, the fear of Hashem is for life. V'saveya yalin, and he'll sleep satisfied. Bal yipakid ra, that no evil will come to him. So that's the simple reading. Sorry, not that he'll sleep satisfied. Yeah, he'll sleep at yalin. Yalin means he'll sleep. So saveya yalin, he'll lie down satisfied, and that bal yipakid ra, that evil won't come to him. If he has Yiras Hashem, his fear of God, he'll go to sleep satisfied that evil won't come to him. So, how does that teach me that if you sleep 7 days without a dream, evil won't come to you? So, says the Gemara, how does it teach you that if you go 7 days without a dream, you will have evil? You're called evil? Says the Gemara, Al Tikri Saveya Ela Sheva. Don't read it as Saveya, which means satisfied. Rather read it as Sheva, 7. So it reads that Yiras Hashem l'chaim, fear of Hashem leads to life. V'sheva yalin, and you'll sleep 7 days. For 7 days you'll sleep. Bal yipaked, if you're not greeted with a dream, ra, then you're called bad. So a bit of a maybe almost Hasidish reading to bring out this drasha, but if besides for that it says Saveya, so don't read as Saveya, read as Sheva, fine. 7 yalin, you'll sleep for 7. Bal yipaked, if you're not greeted, ra, then you're bad. Okay. Amarli Rav Acha Bred Rabbi Yechia bar Abba. Rabbi Acha, the son of Rabbi Yechia bar Abba said, Hachi Amar Rabbi Yechia Amar Rabbi Yochanan. This is what Rabbi Yechia said in Rabbi Yochanan. A different lesson from that pasuk. Kol hamaspia atzmo b'divrei Torah. Anybody who satisfies them, satiates themselves with words of Torah, vilan, and then goes to sleep, then they do not get any bad news to them. Shenemar, as it says, v'saveya yalin, bal yipakid ra. If he goes to sleep satisfied, then evil won't come and greet him. So this is learning Yiras Hashem l'chaim. The beginning of the pasuk, that fear of God, Hashem leads to life, means that which brings you to fear of Hashem, which is learning Torah. Then, if v'saveya yalin, if you go to sleep satiated with Torah, bal yipakid ra, you won't be greeted by any evil. That is the version of Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, we'll pick up from here next time.